This is the start of a series I'm hoping to do on the entire Bible, and starting from very basic levels. As you can see on the slide there, the Bible has a purpose, and we're going to look at all the essential principles of the Christian faith as rooted in the Bible. And there are certain steps that I'm planning to take to reach that goal. And hopefully we'll get the slideshow to work the way I expect it to instead of the way it's working. All right, we're going to do these videos in order, hopefully from the very foundations as to the steps you can see here. First of all, we need to establish the integrity and reliability of the text itself. There's no point in analyzing fiction or forgery, and a book of allegories or codes could mean practically anything. So there's no point in studying the Bible if it is just a code book or an allegory book or fiction or plagiarized or whatever it is. We have to establish that it is a reliable text, that there is evidence that this is a real writing from antiquity, and that it's more than just a story about morality or something like that. The second thing we need to establish is its context, the language, culture, era, the circumstances, the genre, the writer, the situation, the linguistics, the details of language and vocabulary and figures of speech. Those are all factors that determine how we look at the Bible as far as trying to determine what it meant at the time it was written, and then to go from there to discover its teachings. Third, we need to understand its purpose. It's not meant to be an exhaustive encyclopedia of all knowledge or a detailed world history according to modern convention, meaning the way we expect histories to be recorded. They were not always recorded this way, as a dry technical list, basically, or description. They're more storytelling, but that doesn't mean fiction to them. It's just how they relate information. Rather, it is to tell us why and how our realm was made, what went wrong, and the path to restoration. It's God's truth claim. And by the way, it's self-contradictory to say that no one can know truth, because that itself is a truth claim. So there's nothing wrong with claiming truth, and that we claim that the Bible is God's expression of truth, of what really is. And the Bible's purpose, being true, being from God as we believe it to be as Christians, is not to cover everything in detail or spoon feed us everything, but to just tell us what we need to know, which primarily, as I said, is how this all got started. Who started it, of course, is God, but how it got started, something went wrong, and the long path back to restoring that. And the fourth goal is to apply what we learn. If we've done all of those other things, then we can, only then, can we apply it to our lives. A complete understanding of the Bible is pointless if it's not practice. And such application necessarily becomes a personal conviction. Personal convictions are truth claims, and by definition, whatever conflicts with them must be false, because truth divides. So there's no good in knowing the Bible thoroughly if it's just going to stay in your head. You need to practice it if it's a conviction, if you believe it to be true, and you're so convinced it's true that nothing can persuade you otherwise, because you've looked at the evidence and so forth, and this is something that you will not renounce. That's what a conviction is. And therefore, by definition, by logic, whatever clashes with that, whatever contradicts it, is by definition false. And this is what people today, and even a lot of Christians, don't like about Bible study, I guess, or faith in general, is the Christian faith, unlike a lot of others, makes claims to evidence, and claims that cannot be compromised. And so this goes against the grain of every idea having equal worth. There's even non-Christians who would disagree with that statement, that every idea has equal worth. Ideas need to be tested, and especially when they affect the soul. And of course, it will take a lot of time and videos to accomplish those four goals. And my intention is to present them as lessons about a half hour each. I will try to keep to that so that you could, if you wanted to use it in a classroom or a personal study, it wouldn't be very time consuming or something you would have to stop and pick up later. So that's the intent of the series, and I hope we accomplish that. And in this venue where I have it right now at, I was on YouTube. This is on BitChute at the moment, so I think they will allow comments. I don't know much about BitChute or slideshows, so we'll just learn that as we go along. So thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll have some more videos up soon. This lesson is on Bible reliability, manuscripts, and canon. The Bible's trustworthiness hinges on the answers to two questions. One, how do we know the early manuscripts are authentic? And two, how do we know that the Bible is divinely inspired? We start from the understanding that there must be evidence and that there are established objective methods for examining that evidence. The discipline of textual criticism is the primary method, along with archaeology and other sciences. These methods, which have been used and refined over thousands of years, it isn't something new, are used regardless of the content of the writing. That is, they don't change depending on what the documents are about. They examine language, writing style, letter formation, materials, location, time lapses between particular copy being examined and the date the original was likely written. And these are the same for every type of writing, not something particular just for the Bible. Both proponents and critics have applied intense examination to the Bible for generations, yet it still stands as one of the best supported ancient texts. What I've had on the screen is a page from my website that lists many resources to back up this claim. At the very least, we can say that the Bible has at least as much credibility as any other ancient writings, so it cannot be rejected on the basis of lack of evidence unless all other texts are rejected as well. Whatever standards, since we're using the same standards for all ancient writings, then the criteria people typically use to reject the Bible as authentic must also be the same criteria applied to other ancient writings, and in that case, since they fare worse in terms of evidence, they should have to be rejected as well, and people don't do that. But there is more to the Bible's reliability than just the pages and words. The issue of what is canonical or belongs in the Bible is more vigorously debated. But the first point to be established is that only Christians can decide what belongs in the Bible, since it's our holy book. Of course, the Jews decided this for the Old Testament, but I'm focusing on the Bible as a whole and on the Christian faith in particular. No one else has any right to say what the Bible should include. It's our book. We say what's in it. The people outside of our faith don't tell us what should be in the Bible or how to interpret it. Now, I have resources listed on this page because, as I say here, this topic by nature is something that requires more than summaries. It's an attack on evidence, so things must be examined in detail. And that's what I have here is a collection of links by general category. And these links give facts and arguments for what books should be included and how exactly the ancients decided such things. How did they determine what was to be included in the Bible? The standard English canon could be considered the minimum list since little of it is disputed. The main disagreements are over the inclusion of additional works such as the Apocrypha or deuterocanonical books or pseudegraphical, all sorts of technical terms, and there's Book of Enoch, Book of Jasher. I have read Enoch 1, 2, and 3. 2 and 3 can pretty much be easily discarded. If you read them, it's just like way out there. Enoch 1 is fairly interesting and for the most part does not conflict with the Bible, but it is not necessary for anybody's faith. It doesn't no teaching of the Bible hinges on the content in Enoch, and its mention in Jude is not proof that there was a book of Enoch. It just says Enoch was a person. Now we have Book of Jasher, we have, which by the way is not someone's name, it's the righteous, the Book of the Righteous. That's what Jasher means. And those books, some of the things, like I said, we have books for, and some, like Enoch, the Bible doesn't mention a book of Enoch. It just says Enoch prophesied. So we have to be careful about those things, but again, they don't hinge, none of the teachings of the Bible hinge on those works that are not included in the standard English canon. There are other canons around the world, but they are, as I said, extra things for the most part. There are maybe a few things that are in dispute, and that were in dispute in the early centuries AD for inclusion, but eventually they were, and I don't think it was the result of any sectarian bias to decide which were and were not included. They went on evidence, they went on testimony, on the understanding of elders on what was corroborated by the prophets, and the prophets being determined by whether everything they said came true, that if they prophesied something would happen, it happened every time, 100% of the time. And the quality of the witnesses is everything, as in any court of law. The quality of witnesses is everything. And those are the kind of factors that went into the ancients' decision on what was in the Bible. Churches notwithstanding since then, because as we'll see in later lessons, the idea of church as tradition has had it is nothing like what the Bible teaches. So, but we'll save that for another day. For right now, we're looking at these resources on this page, which you can find at my website under features. And my websites are listed on my channel here on About. It's feather.net, FETHER.net. And you can find everything else from there. So the resources on this page give facts and arguments for what books should be included and how exactly the ancients decided such things. The standard English canon, as I said, could be considered the minimum list. So what we can say with high confidence against the claims of critics is that the canon was not decided by a mere committee, by a bunch of bureaucrats, or by some, there's some forgery tales that they, the people at Nicaea or one of the councils piled a bunch of books on a table and decided to just wait and see what fell off, and whatever stayed was in the canon. That's absolute bunk. It never happened. Nobody ever used that. Neither was the canon decided by the Council of Nicaea, and most people don't know that. The Council of Nicaea had only to do with a dispute over the deity of Christ between Arius, who was teaching he was not divine but created, and Athanasius was the chief proponent of the counter-argument, and he won the debate. And even so, things, regardless of the decision, history shows that people just went their separate ways. They didn't all agree on this decision. It wasn't, people marching lockstep at all. But that was the official decision of Constantine and his court, and Constantine's purpose there was simply to moderate the debate. He wanted order. He did not care about the canon. He didn't care about its content. He cared about order, and he cared about these bishops, for lack of a better term, of what they would agree on and teach as official canon, and also to establish a liturgical calendar, neither of which are proposed by the New Testament writers. So, and we can also rule out the Jesuits. They're another popular offering for who decided what was in the Bible, and no such thing is true because they didn't even exist until 1540, and the canon was established before Constantine. Like I said, the Council of Nicaea did not even discuss the canon. That was a later council after Constantine had died, and the canon was well established by then. It was just a matter of official recognition and guarding against forgeries. So we have these, first of all, the early manuscripts, as you can see here on the screen. We have from, you can see in the one link here, parts of the Gospel of John from 130 AD, which is phenomenal in terms of ancient text, to have documents so short a time, or extant manuscripts they call them, from the time of the original writing. Jesus was alive in the first century, and certainly nothing of Judaism remained as biblical Judaism in any kind of way after 70 AD with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Roman general Titus, that this is phenomenal for anything to survive that early on after the events. And again, the fact that we even have parts of the Gospel of John from that early on tells us that the Bible existed, that Jesus existed before that time. So we can also cite the so-called church fathers, the early writers about the Bible and about Jesus, and they, in their quotes alone of Scripture, we could take those quotes and reassemble the whole New Testament. So the time of the New Testament is very well established. We have the latest possible time of somewhere in the first century. So the evidence is very strong, much stronger than those for other religious writings and even historical secular writings. We have much better evidence. So you can check out these links there if you want to pursue the details. And then, of course, the canon again. As I noted here, not even Wikipedia, which is in no way predisposed to support Christian teachings, they don't believe that Constantine determined the canon or anything like that. Christian Think Tank is an excellent site for digging into scholarly arguments and details. And then we have also a link about the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Gnostic Gospels. So we also will eventually get into more about the content of the Bible as far as contradictions and borrowing and plagiarism and all that. But first we had to establish that the text we're looking at in at least the standard English canon is reliable. And it is by scientific basis, by textual basis, is determine whether that's scientific or not. There's a lot of what I would call forensic evidence as well, because science can only examine physical objects and in their present form and try to do tests on them to determine about how old they might be, which is only good for maybe in the 1,000 years range. But by any possible methods that are used across the board for any ancient evidence of whether it's paper, papyrus, animal skins, whatever things are written on, stone, artifacts, cultural evidence outside the Bible, these are all applied to the Bible as to any other ancient text, and the Bible stands very strongly, at least as strongly as anything else. So we can have very high confidence in the Bible at least as much as anything else. And as I said earlier, if we're going to throw out the Bible on the basis of lack of evidence or insufficient evidence, then we must also throw out pretty much all of history before the 1st century or before the 2nd or 3rd century. And since we're not doing that, nobody is, not even the most ardent skeptic is going to do that, then by their own standards, the Bible must be included as reliable historical documents. So, that being the case, we have established that the Bible is a reliable text, and there have been no discoveries of any sort that have shown the Bible to be historically inaccurate. Throughout time, as you can see at some of these links, we have found out that when people claimed that something didn't exist, such as the city of Jericho or the Hittite nation, today you can go and study the Hittite language and culture in university. The walls of Jericho have been discovered, all flattened. So every time the skeptics say the Bible is fairy tales, it's just things that people made up, these things never existed, the Bible turns out to be true and everybody else a liar. So you can trust the Bible. That's the point of this lesson, is the trustworthiness of the Bible, and that on that basis, then it gives us a reason to study it. So, as I said, we're going to look in future lessons on the issue of alleged contradictions, inerrancy and inspiration, claims of plagiarizing and tampering. So hopefully this was helpful, and try to stay tuned for the next lesson, and I'm hoping through the Holy Spirit that this whole series will be helpful to everyone. Thanks again for listening.